Hey guys, Benny Bam coming at you strong. Like a little bit about Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul. This was announced, and it's gotten all kinds of reactions from people saying it's elderly abuse because Tyson's not going to be able to, hang with a guy 30 years younger than him. To people saying, "Wow, if this is a real boxing match, then and Tyson hits him one time, it's over." Um, and I think, like most things, the truth lies in between, too, right? So I think, first of all, please like and subscribe if you have not done that. That really helps me out a lot. I appreciate it. Help me to give you content, use better equipment, all those kinds of things when you like and subscribe because of the revenue that it can generate. So I really appreciate it, guys. If you like, subscribe, share, obviously, if you want to on any social media, if you like what you're hearing. If not, then hey, thanks for coming anyway. I really appreciate you watching and caring about, clicking on this. Um, I think the truth is in between. First of all, what is it going to be a sanctioned match? Usually, they don't sanction people in their 50s to have legitimate boxing matches, which is the same reason that Roy and Tyson a few years ago was not a sanctioned match, and it's an exhibition that ultimately ended in a draws because it kind of had to because they couldn't really do that. It's the same reason why Tyson wasn't really taking gratuitous headshots on Roy Jones, and they were really kind of keeping most things to the body and all of that kind of stuff, which is interesting because obviously Roy is a real boxer with quite a legacy behind him, but he hasn't been, top notch guy for quite a few years by the time that fight happened, and neither had Tyson really by that point. And Tyson hadn't even really been boxing or keeping himself in shape for a while leading up to that fight. Of course, now he's been kind of reignited and has decided to get back in shape and do all the things that are necessary to have a fight like this, right? And obviously, you see Jake Paul, who's a master promoter. He's got the MVP Promotions. It's cited on our thumbnail image here that you can see, and he's doing a great job of promoting himself. He started through YouTube, really, building his brand that way, and then started becoming an actual fighter as far as boxing parlance goes. Whether you think that's right, wrong, or different, he started against guys like Nate Robinson, who's a former pro basketball player who's quite a bit smaller than him, but he really became somebody who is galvanized the way fighting works as far as these big high dollar things that most boxers are trying to get. He can walk in and get because of his platform, because of all that. Now obviously his brother has fought in an exhibition, or whatever you think of that fight, versus Floyd Mayweather, and did pretty well for a guy that really doesn't have experience doing that. And now Logan is in WWE, and he is tearing it up in WWE as far as his ability in the ring, and his athleticism and everything that he can do is fantastic. He is a very great person to watch, Logan Paul. And Jake is still doing it up. Obviously, he did lose his last bout against a real boxer who was undefeated in Fury. And that is, you know, interesting because as we see with Ngannou and Joshua, there are levels to this as far as where you are and what you're really able to do as far as all the little details that go into something like boxing, which is why they call it the sweet science. I mean, it's really the science of distance and how to close distance properly and how to not get yourself damaged while you're doing that. And that's really what makes it so interesting to see these guys. Now obviously, a prime Mike Tyson was going, he was just mowing through people. A lot of that had to do with his ability. A lot of it had to do with his attitude. If he gets inside your arms, as we saw a guy like Lennox Lewis that later on was able to keep Tyson kind of away from him. He dominated Tyson because he could keep him away because of his length and understanding how to keep that science of distance. Because if Tyson gets inside your arms, then now he's be able to use all that power from his smaller base to be able to really use that force to hurt you, whether it's body shots or headshots or whatever, right? And he obviously is very good at body shots. So there's a lot of things that go into this fight. Like, are they going to be wearing headgear? They probably are. You know what I mean? So that won't keep you from getting knocked out, though. Headgear is protective, but it's not. You can still take a shot and go down even when you have headgear on. I've done a couple bouts when I was a little bit younger where I had headgear on, and if you get hit, it still hurts. It pads it a little bit, but it's if you get hit by somebody like Mike Tyson, I mean, there's not a whole lot of headgear in the world that's going to help you, right? It'll help a little bit, but it's not going to stop you from falling down or from losing consciousness if it hits you hard enough in the right place. I mean, that's just the way it goes, right? That's how human anatomy works. So that's interesting. As far as the movement and all that stuff, I mean, Paul is definitely a good boxer at this point. A lot of people have been talking about, is the fix in? And the only way that Tyson would lose is if he agreed to that from Paul. I don't personally believe that. I don't have any inside information, but I don't believe that Mike Tyson would take a fight to take a fall. because that would be disrespectful to the sport that built him, the fame and life that he was able to have at certain points. Whether, he stayed that way, and obviously he had other issues and there were other things going on legally with him in the 90s and into the 2000s. And then he kind of, when the Hangover movie came out, he kind of had a rebirth as this sympathetic figure that people really, enjoyed seeing make a comeback. And then when he came against Roy Jones, it became a literal comeback. And now against Jake Paul, it's still he's literally having a comeback, although it's not for a contendership. It's not for a real championship, obviously, in the parlance of boxing. But why would it be? Mike Tyson's done all that already. He's already been the world champ. He was the most feared man in the world, baddest man on the planet. There was nobody that wanted to get in the ring with him. You have guys like George Foreman who have done interviews saying, I was actively staying away from guys like Mike Tyson when I had my comeback. I didn't want any part of that, right? And apparently they were going to do a Holyfield-Tyson rematch. But if you see Holyfield now, I don't know if it's CTE or there's something going on with him that his over the last several years, he's really slowed down, where he's talking real slow and he just doesn't seem to pick up on things the same way that he once did, which is sad because Holyfield's one of my favorite all-time boxers, and his matches with Tyson's in the 90s were just epic, from the ear thing to they had a couple bouts in totality, and they were just fascinating to watch those two guys go at it because of the skills that each one brought to the table. For what Jake Paul is as a boxer, is a boxer. I mean, he can box, he can get in there, he knows how to jab, he knows how to move his feet, he knows how to do a lot of things. Does he understand fully how to keep Mike Tyson away from him? Because that's really what this is going to come down to. Because if Tyson gets close to Jake Paul, that's not going to be good for Jake Paul. Right now, if he can keep him away and kind of use his distance and his height, being, a guy that's over 6 feet tall and all that, and being able to kind of do that and really work on that with whoever is training him, that would be really the way to go. I think that, for it to be a long match and a good bout where people feel good about it. I mean, it is on Netflix, so it's not necessarily the same as the normal pay-per-view model for a fight and all that. That's kind of going out the door anyway, because pay-per-view in general is kind of going away, but it still happens, but not nearly as frequently for these things as it used to. Now there's other platforms, there's all kinds of different streaming services, from Amazon to obviously Netflix and many others like Max and stuff. And a lot of them are now getting into live sports, although Netflix is a little late to the game, but they're getting in there, and they've got WWE coming too. So obviously that's huge, right? And the Pauls are doing great. I mean, WWE just announced that Prime is and the Lakers just announced that Prime is the official sports drink, which is Logan Paul's sports drink of the entire organization. That's huge. So obviously these guys are making an impact, and they really know how to market. And that's what these companies are seeing in them to give them these big title fights for these millions of dollars and all that, is these guys are marketing geniuses. We need to be a part of that because we're going to make a lot of money too. And then it will help us expand our audience for live sports and all these other things. All those things are true. But when you get into a boxing match and it's just two of you guys standing in the ring, no matter what the hype is and the marketing, when all that fades away and you get to the actual X's and O's of what is going to happen when you're playing an actual sport, when you're performing, a lot of the things get misunderstood by viewers. I played basketball my whole life up until just recently. And I can tell you that people that watch basketball and tell me things about basketball usually don't know what they're talking about, because there's so many details that you don't understand, right? And it's just the same way that people go, oh, basketball's not a physical sport. Excuse me, then why do I have all these injuries from physical stuff that happened playing, right? Like, it's like, what? That doesn't make any sense, right? But, ultimately, there's a lot of detail work that goes into performing in a situation like that, and understanding it. And then the levels of understanding it, as far as the details of how to do this, how to do that, how to maneuver, how to do this, not just the basics that anybody would know. Not to mention the fact that in something like boxing, there's a real thing called muscle memory, where, you've been doing this for so long. And Mike Tyson, his entire life, as would be a fight. He said that in interviews, my entire life has been a fight, right? Like, it's been, this and that. And it doesn't mean that every single aspect has, but there's been times in his life that have been fights where he had to get through this, had to get through that, had to deal with prison, had to deal with another, whatever the next guy was, had to deal with Larry Holmes, had to deal with, Evander Holyfield, had to deal with Lennox Lewis, had to deal with all these guys coming, had to deal with the Buster Douglas crap that, Buster, he didn't take seriously enough and Buster put him down, right? And then that was like the craziest thing to watch, because you're just like, whoa, because Mike Tyson had been like Ronda Rousey when she was in MMA and dominating people, where nobody understood how to do anything with her. But eventually they figured it out, just like Lennox Lewis eventually figured out Tyson and how to kind of, have a great boxing match against somebody like him that had his attributes. And that's what these guys do. They're technicians. They're going to figure that out. If you're not a technician, then you're in big trouble. We just saw that with Ngannou and Joshua, right? Where Ngannou and Joshua get in there, and we had seen Ngannou take on Tyson Fury, but Tyson Fury is more of a tactical boxer where he's really looking for the scoring part of it. There's really not a whole lot of times where he's just going for a straight knockout. And Anthony Joshua is a whole different type of boxer where he has the technical prowess, but he also is looking for knockouts, right? So he's going to go after it. If he sees an opening, he's going to take a chance and he's going to go, right? And that's what happened to Ngannou. He figured out that Ngannou was not guarding himself properly, and he took him out. And he knocked him down the first time, and then it showed where the weakness was. He knocked him down the second time, and then once he knocked him down the second time, he's like, this guy can't take a punch. So as soon as he got back up, he just threw another right hand at him and said, all I have to do is connect, and this is over. And that's exactly what happened. And that's because Joshua is a world-class boxer who's been doing this. He was an Olympic boxer, so he understands all the X's and O's and technical part of it. And then he also understands the professional, box office knockout part of it too. And so he really did that. And he's trying to prove a point too to get himself back into contendership. So he knew that if I can take this guy down that Fury had some trouble with, and you can argue who won that fight between Ngannou and Fury. Maybe Ngannou did win that fight. I don't know, but Fury got the decision, but Fury also didn't seem to take it seriously enough, right? Anytime you get into a ring with somebody, and that's what can happen, and that's really the point that I'm trying to make, right? If you're somebody even as good as Tyson Fury, and you get in there and you don't take it seriously enough, you're not in shape, you don't train properly, and you don't take your opponent seriously who's in another fighting discipline, you can have what happened to him with Ngannou, knocking him down and rocking him and then standing over him and going, hey, what's up? And he got back up and they finished the fight, and by decision, Fury won. But ultimately you have to be on your P's and Q's if you're going to get in there and fight somebody, even if it's an exhibition or whatever, because not everybody, if you're in there, you're still throwing punches, right? Anything can happen, even if it's not supposed to, you can hit somebody and still knock them down, right? But I don't believe that Mike Tyson's getting into this fight to just have a good showing or anything like that. I think that he will really fight. Now, will he go full force and go straight for Paul's head? I don't know. We'll see. It depends on what the rules and regulations of the match are and if it's sanctioned or not. If it's sanctioned as a real boxing match, he probably will. If it's not, and they know that that's not going to happen, and they have to wear all the extra gear and all that kind of stuff too because of the parlance of the match and all the rules and regulations that are imparted on that, then he might just go for body shots. But I'll be honest, even a body shot from Mike Tyson, at full force would break your ribs, and that is, that has got to be a frightening thought for Jake Paul right now, because as much as you're going to make a bunch of money and stuff, if you get in there and you are not really respecting Mike Tyson as Mike Tyson, bad things can happen to you, and that's really, Ngannou got in there and he sought out Anthony Joshua, right? And even after the match, you saw he knew he had made a bunch of money and he was still disappointed because he knew in his head, like, I've underestimated this guy, like, he's a world champion for a reason. I didn't respect that. And this is what happens when you don't do that. And that's what's going to happen. And it's the same way that Fury really disrespected him, in the match before that, where he didn't take him seriously enough for his striking capability. I mean, Ngannou's not a pro boxer, but let's not kid ourselves. I mean, he's been knocking dudes out in UFC and getting hit and all this kind of stuff. And obviously he can do a lot more than just box with takedowns and other things that are in your head. And as we've seen with, the McGregor Mayweather fight was two guys just kind of tapping each other. And obviously you could tell that McGregor didn't really know what he was doing because he kept trying to, knee and do weird stuff that you would do in MMA. And they were like, hey, what are you doing? Don't do that. But that was still entertaining, right? And this match will definitely be entertaining. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it'll be entertaining to watch Jake Paul step in there against Mike Tyson. I have so many questions about it that I don't really know what the answers are. Like, what weights are they each going to be at? What headgear are they going to use? If they're going to use headgear, if they don't use headgear, then is it sanctioned? And does that mean that it's a real boxing match? If it's a real boxing match and Mike Tyson gets in there and he gets sanctioned to fight at what will be 58 years old when the match takes place, that would be really interesting because that doesn't happen a lot with guys his age. I'm not saying I don't think he could do it. I'm saying I don't know if the commission will allow it. You know what I mean? That's really more so what it comes down to than whether I think he could do it. That's not really the problem. if you're expecting to see Mike Tyson of the 90s, I don't think you're going to see that. You're going to see a lot like you saw in 2020. You might see a little bit better than you saw in 2020 because he's been training a lot more with some serious guys. He's been training for a lot longer now, and really keeping himself in shape these last few years and getting himself back into that, as he says, the God of War mode and all that kind of stuff. The same thing you've seen him when he's on Joe Rogan and all these other things where he's been talking previously about unlocking that and being afraid to unlock it for so long because he knew what would happen. And but maybe in a way that's good for him is to relive a little bit of that for a moment. But Jake Paul's got to be trying to suppress all of that. He's got to be going, no, 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 that's not going to happen. And if he can really work on his jabs and really work on protecting his body and protecting himself, maybe Jake can take this, a distance and they will have an entertaining match. And maybe Mike will see all that stuff and understand it and they'll have a really good long match. But, if they go in there and anybody is really trying to knock the other guy out, I've heard people say, well, if it really ends up being a match like that where they really can knock each other out and they're actually trying to knock each other out, that of course Jake Paul would be the advantage because he's the younger guy. He's taller. He's, I don't know weight wise if he's bigger, but he's bigger in a way. He's got a longer reach, all those kinds of things. But that's crazy because Mike Tyson's knocked out all kinds of dudes that are bigger than him. So he's kind of the exception to that rule. So to even say something like that to me just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I think that it's going to be a very interesting match. I think Mike Tyson is going to go in there and try not to embarrass himself or Jake Paul. And I think Jake Paul's hoping that he doesn't embarrass himself because if he goes in there and he gets starched, everybody's going to just continue on that narrative of, well, now you lost to Fury by decision and now you can't beat Mike Tyson at 58 years old, right? So now, you're basically just a sideshow at this point in the parlance of people saying that. Not that I think that. I don't think that. I love what he's doing because it brings attention to boxing. I love what his brother's doing because it's good for WWE. I want to see all those things grow and be successful, and I want to see boxing survive and be a legitimate enterprise where these guys can make money doing it. MMA is always kind of depressing because these guys make a couple $100,000 a year, which is, fine and everything. And some of them make a lot more than that, but at what risk, right? In an MMA match, anything can happen to you. You can shatter a leg. You can be done for life if you take a hit the wrong way in MMA. I mean, technically in boxing, you could too, and you see that certainly over time, but it seems to be more cumulative in boxing where it really takes time for that to build up. Like we're talking about with Holyfield, like we're talking about with, guys like George Foreman, where, you see it as they age, that it's really having an effect, right? And of course it is. You're getting hit in the head by guys that hit really hard, and even if you can take a punch, right? Like we were talking about how Ngannou had an iron chin going into that match, and then he took a couple punches. There's no side effect to taking a punch like that. Concussions are real, CTE is real. And as we learn more and more about science, bioscience, brain science, all these kinds of things, and how the brain actually interacts and stuff, you learn just how damaging that stuff really is and how it's not like a normal cut on your arm where it just heals and then you're fine, right? Like there's a real cumulative damaging effect to all those things that affect you forever. And that is something that is certainly to be taken account, and maybe why these guys have to wear headgear and why it may be an exhibition where technically you're not really allowed to have a knockout on an exhibition. It might happen, but you're not really supposed to. So, we'll see what the rules are, and then that will really dictate what kind of fight it's going to be. But if it ends up being a real fight in any way, shape, or form, I do not think that Jake Paul is just going to starch Mike Tyson. There's no way. I don't care. I mean, I just don't see how that could happen. He could throw his hardest punch and hit Mike Tyson right in the face. And the other thing is he's probably not going to be able to do that. Mike Tyson knows how to move. He knows how to protect himself. He's not just going to go in there and eat punches from Jake Paul because he's making money. I just don't see that being the case. I don't, when he fought Roy, he was still throwing, but he wasn't trying to get hit. He got hit a few times by Roy, but he wasn't trying to get hit. You know what I mean? And so I don't think he's going to be trying to get hit in this either. And I think Jake Paul's got a long night for him, or maybe a short night if this is a real fight. So, I like Jake. I respect his ability. I like what he's done. He's great at building a business. He's great at promoting. Obviously, he's doing this continually. And, now he's kind of building an empire off of it, which is fantastic. I respect that. And, same thing that I try to do with my sports stuff. I definitely respect what he's trying to do, the hustle and the risks that he takes by putting his own literal body on the line to do these things and to learn this and to step in there with guys that have been doing it since they were kids and have all these attributes built up that make them very dangerous for someone like him who haven't been doing it for as long. But we'll see what happens. I'm very interested to watch it. I mean, my personal opinion is I don't see a way that Mike Tyson will lose to Jake Paul. I just don't see how. But you never know, and that's what makes it so fun. If you would ask me going into the Joshua Ngannou fight, I would have told you I would have thought, that Joshua was going to beat him, but I don't know that I would have told you he would have beat him like immediately like that, right when the fight starts. But it makes sense because of the skill difference in life, right? In that sport and in that experience level is nothing to be played with, right? It makes a big difference. And if Fury had went in the same way he's going into his championship fight, like right now where you see him in great shape and all this kind of stuff, if Tyson Fury had done that against Ngannou, I think it may have been a very different outcome. And if he had really taken that seriously, and you could tell that he kind of didn't and was like, whatever, and he got exactly what he deserved. And so, as long as these guys both take it seriously, and I think Mike Tyson respects the sport enough to do that, I think Jake Paul wouldn't be doing all of this and stepping in there with these killers because he has to take it even more seriously than they do. Because if he doesn't, he's going to get starched and be in a situation like Ngannou where he's laying on the mat, right at the beginning of the second round, going, "What just happened?" And Ngannou, you could argue, is even more of a killer and ferocious beast who's on a much higher proven combat sports level than Jake Paul. And that happened to him, right? And Mike Tyson was champion of the world, just like Anthony Joshua and these guys are. And you can argue that Tyson's even better at his prime. So maybe not, depending on your opinion of Joshua and Tyson and all these guys involved. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens, and I'm very excited to see it. I hope you guys all tune in on Netflix. Please, please, please like, subscribe. If you want to share it, cool, but please at least hit the like and subscribe button on the bottom. That really helps out a lot. Thanks.